my name is John Barclay, and this is my wife Janine, and we are delighted to be able to have this fireside chat. We're in front of the fire, but there's the fireplace, but there's no fire. But it's so wonderful to have this time with Ruthie and Rod Gilbert. Of course, you're well known to many in the Hebron community over many years. So it's a great privilege for us and a joy to have this time. Our connection with you, I think, began in the early 90s, in 1992, February, when our daughter Catherine joined Hebron, and you were at the helm at that time.
That's right.
Yes.
And so we were Hebron parents from 1992 onwards, although I was an old boy from the 60s.
That's right.
And we had visited the school earlier, just to check it out, in 89, I think, because we were working in Nepal at the time, which was a very long way away, a 4-day train journey. But we were really delighted that Catherine was able to join, and then Nicholas came in 1994, 2 years later, when you were still at the helm. Let's go back and talk. First of all, Rod, you have a very long association with, not so much with Hebron initially, but with Lushington and Breeks. So just tell us about that.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Breeks, we've had an association with Breeks School right from 1947.
We meaning your family.
My family.
Yes.
When my eldest brother, Jim, joined the school here. I joined in 1950 as a little 5-year-old down in the Theobald block, I think it is, in Breeks. And ever since, we've had connections with the school right through until, when did Andy leave?
Andy left in 2013.
Yes.
So it's a long time.
Yeah, a big span.
That's right.
But you are a boarder, of course, here at Lushington.
I was a boarder at Lushington, and so every working day, we had to line up in the front of the what is now into the storm, and then in ranks, and we marched to school to Breeks, all in our
Crocodile.
yeah. Well, it was
ranks.
three in our ranks, and we had very militarial because I mean things were very militarial. Still had to march in these khaki capes, no matter what. And the prefects were sometimes a little bit rough in pushing us into the right lines.
Well, that tradition continued on through the 60s when Lushington Boys' School started, because we had to march not to school but to church,
To Union
morning
Church.
and evening, to Union Church. So we would march in our dorm ranks
Would you?
through the town, morning and evening,
Yeah.
11 o'clock, 7 o'clock service. But tell us a little bit more about the transition then from being a student. I think you came back, didn't you, as a teacher, a short-term teacher? So
Yes.
the school was changing by that time, and it was Lushington Boys' School.
That's right.
That you returned to.
Lushington Boys' School. I actually had brought a bunch of kids down here from the school I was teaching in. I was a VSO teacher in Nasik, and I brought a bunch of kids down here to see the place. I was very proud of my school. And then after leaving that school, I arranged with Rupert Darling to come and to spend a year here after I'd done 2 years teaching up in the north of India. And that was a very interesting time for me, moving from being a teacher, from being a student to being a teacher, and being in charge of Interdorm. That was really quite something very interesting for me. Yeah.
Right. Good.
And Ruthie, what about your first visit to Hebron then? What were your impressions? And
Interesting.
when was that?
My very first visit, Janine, was must have been 1974 when I came to India. So it's 50 years ago, exactly 50 years ago. And I came to India as a student. I was 20, and I came to India to visit who was an Indian pastor working amongst tribal people. And I came to stay with him for 6 weeks. And at that time, didn't know anything really about this person, Rod Gilbert, but I was staying in Uti, and he said, you must come and visit this prestigious British school. So he brought me in his funny little old car, and we stopped at the bottom of the drive, and we walked up the drive, and it was a monsoony kind of evening, and I thought, whoa, where are we going? It was trees and dripping water, and I walked up the drive, and I can remember my first feeling, thinking, I think I'm back in England. At the end of that visit, at the end of the 6-week visit, I went up to Bombay in those days,
By my invitation.
by Rod's invitation. He was working with Scripps Union, and we met and got engaged within 3 days on Juhu
Well, I
Beach.
say, never let a good thing pass, you know. I grabbed when I could. And this lovely girl coming from England, I thought, right, let's go. Woohoo!
So that was it. So it's actually exactly 50 years ago that we got
Yes,
engaged
yes,
on
that's
Juhu
right.
Beach, which in those days was just a beautiful beach full of palm trees and, you know, amazingly romantic place to get engaged. Then I went back to England and I finished my teacher training. And then we got married and came back to India. Working with Scripps Union, we used to come to Hebron and run Scripps Union Week programs.
Yeah.
And by that time, of course, it was Hebron.
It
as
was
in
Hebron.
It was no longer Lushington Boys' School.
That's
That's
right.
Which you
right.
would have visited. It became
Yes.
Hebron School,
Yes.
the co-ed
Yes.
amalgamated school.
Yes, yes. The
Luke-
next visit
Luke
was
came.
when we were bringing our eldest son, Luke, as a 7-year-old. At that point, we did not realize that we would be following, and we would be following Luke, following year actually. So Luke came to Hebron, and I remember bringing him with very, very mixed emotions, as you do. And yet we knew this was going to be the very, very best place for him. We were working in Pune, so we brought him, and he came straight in as a 7-year-old, and the sense of this is going to be great, but it was hard, and yet we were so grateful that very soon after that, as a family, we joined. Yes.
So that must have happened very quickly to take over from Jonathan
Yes.
and come as the principal.
Yes, I
Yes.
mean, the process started with Barry Jenkins at Union Church. He had approached me and said, would you be interested?
Because Barry was on the council.
That's right.
Yes.
And they said, we were looking for another principal. Mr. Ingleby's leaving. So would you be interested in coming? And I said, no, not at the moment, not at all. But I said, when you get to the bottom of the barrel, contact me again. And Barry said, well, we're actually at the bottom of the barrel.
And I think you had that conversation over the washing
Yeah,
up.
it's washing up in the manse here at Union Church. And so I looked at him and said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, I want you to apply to be. So that's how it all started. And Robin Thompson, who was a council member, and Barry Jenkins spoke to me and talked to me about it, etc. And to be honest, it was hard because I'd been used to all our Indian Christian schools, and I thought, I really don't think that this is going to fit me, even though I'm an old boy. But it was God's pattern, and He enabled us to come here, maybe to bring a few changes, but to make a significant difference in the future. And in fact, that's what happened. Yeah.
So that was in 1987, I think.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
It
right,
was
yeah.
86
Yeah, like-
that we made the decision that it was definitely the right thing, God's will, God's
Yes.
plan for us. And I remember coming up with Rod and meeting the council and sensing we can't say no, we must say yes. And we're so glad we did.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, it was a decade later, you were instrumental in bringing us from Nepal to Hebron.
Yes.
So we blame you for that.
I'll take the blame. I don't mind.
Happily take the blame. We were
But
thrilled.
let's come to your time here. I mean, that was a very significant time for the school. It was by this stage a co-ed school, of course. And there were a number of things that happened during your tenure here. I think you left in 1995.
That's right.
95, that's right,
Yes.
yes.
So during those years, one of the things was one of the changes, I think, and tell me more about this, it was the composition of the teaching staff in particular began to change. Just say a little bit about that,
Yes,
just very briefly.
Well, it was a time when, as far as government was concerned, it was difficult, and visas were relatively difficult to get. And we knew that the school could not just depend on overseas teachers coming in. And we knew from our contact with other English medium schools throughout South India, we knew there were some high quality people who could easily fit into this environment here. And so we felt, and we talked to the council about it, and we agreed to try and widen our our recruitment for teachers and for dorm people into people who from India who could fit into this kind of environment. And we found some very high quality people.
So let me just drop a couple of names,
Yes.
3 in particular,
Yes.
Tom and Volta George.
Absolutely. They actually had joined us just a few months before we arrived.
So I think they were actually recruited by Jonathan.
They were.
And they were here as you
That's
arrived.
right.
And
The
they
other
were
one-
wonderful neighbours to us.
Yes.
We lived up in the cottages, up above the swimming pool, and they were our neighbours. And Valsa taught me lots of wonderful cooking.
And the other person is Ruby Mungaldas.
Ruby.
Yes.
I mean, there are others too, but those 3 names stand out.
They were, and Ruby was a stalwart, and she really has held so much of the school together over the years, because through all the changes, you know, these dear people have solidly stayed, and that's been such a blessing for the school, I believe.
And there have been a number of other significant Indian members of
Yes,
staff who
yes.
have stayed long term, and they have been the backbone of the
Yes.
school. We
Yeah,
can mention many
yeah,
other
absolutely.
names
Yes,
too.
many people.
Another thing that significant feature of your time here was the changes in the building construction, and you know, your background as an architect or in architecture obviously helped you in that. But let's just talk about that briefly, because I think that's good to have a record of some of the things that happened, and who was your right-hand man during
Yes.
those years.
Yes. Well, the initiation came from my own memories of lying in bed in these big dormitories, hearing the rain drumming on the roof. In fact, I named
Rain on a Tin Roof.
I named the
That's
book
right,
after that.
that's right.
And so it was motivated by my sense of this. I don't like the concept of big dormitories with huge spaces, etc. And so we set about with Jairam. Now, Jairam was my right-hand man in this. He was an absolute gem. I'd say to him, look, Jairam, what should we do about making this dormitory a different shape and change it, etc.? And he'd have the ideas, and I'd say, yes, that would work. And then he'd say, well, I don't think it would work because the walls are not strong enough. And so together we cut channels in these old walls and put
mud brick
concrete pillars in right down into the earth. You can't see them now; they're all nicely hidden up. But those buildings are very solidly built, and that's because Jairam was a man who understood structure, and I understood it from an architectural point of view as well. And so it was a great partnership, and we enjoyed it tremendously. And the way that we were able to change so much of the school over the years was good. And the council generously allowed us to use up lakhs of money. We got some grants from places overseas, etc. But we were able to use a lot of money which had been put into fixed deposits, and we were able to draw them out. And they agreed to go about this major change of the physical facilities here.
I think the physical facilities were able to just enhance what was in our hearts, which was to bring about a change of atmosphere.
Which is what I was going to ask,
Yeah.
because the purpose of, especially in the dorm, so let's identify some of the particular mezzanine floors that you
Yes.
put in the old buildings,
Yes.
the old stables as they were
That's right.
back in the day.
Yeah.
So the whole Inters block, you know, and
That-
gardens and etc. Keep
Yeah,
going.
I mean, that was the first target, and I have to admit it was because I remembered Interdorm as it was before, and I thought I can't ask parents to put their children in these large barns. So yes, Interstorm was the first
Large
attempt.
stables.
Large shit.
That's right, yes. But we did try and keep some sort of concept of enhancing, and so we put those, you'll notice on the top of Inters, well, the joins Inters and Middle Dorm, we put the parapets to try and match the parapets on the main building. So we tried to bring some sort of enhanced
Consistency.
unity and of the buildings, yeah. It was good fun.
But of course, it wasn't just an architectural exercise. And so,
That's
Ruthie, do you
right.
want to
Yes.
elaborate on what you were saying?
Yes,
that
I think
the
it-
real intent was
Intent.
to
The intent was really to the sense of family for Hebron, and I think that's really been the heart. If I can just add a little memory I have of when we first arrived, very soon after we arrived, and we arrived with our 4 children, and dear Sebastian, who was heading up the kitchen staff at that time, and it was one of the principal's wife's duties and roles to be in charge of the sort of kitchen side of things and the menus and making sure everything was okay. And dear Sebastian came to me one morning. He said, "Mrs. Ingleby, 2 children, big. You, 4 children, small. You do family, I am boss. And it was just brilliant. But it was certainly about our family, but it was a broader understanding. Why did we want the dorms to change? The sense of family.
Yeah.
And your, yes.
And with that, of course, also meant changing a lot of the accommodation that dorm parents or dormitories in charge had, because a lot of it was by single men or single ladies, and they did a jolly good job for what they had. But we tried to get the dormitory facilities, the facility for the dorm parents, to be like a family home, so that they could have their children along with them and invite their children, invite the dormitory children to come into their home as part of the dormitory atmosphere.
That's right.
So it's breaking down the units and putting in dorm parents who are prepared to actually take these wayward kids, boarders, into their home as part of their family as well.
So Ruthie, just going back, you just mentioned about one of your roles as a principal's wife, which was
Yes.
taken off you in a sense before you started.
Yes.
But tell us a bit about how you saw that role and then what it
Yes.
meant for you, like for your family as well.
Right. At the time when we started, Janine, we lived up in one of the cottages at the top, and our children were very young at that point. But my sense, my main role, I used to say to people, my role was the cup of coffee person. And I used to really enjoy coming, just being around and being present and being available for cups of coffee, for opportunities for staff, students to chat. I enjoy hospitality. That's one of the things I love. And so we did have a lot of people in for meals. I was involved in some of the sort of management areas and decision making, along with Peter and Annette Hill, who were vice principal and the school doctor at the time. But my main sense was I want to create a family atmosphere here. And I remember when we moved at the end of our first year, we moved down to the central
Which had
part
always
of the
been
school.
the headmaster's or
That's
principal's
right.
flat.
That's right. We moved there, and I loved that place because I could always see when people came up the drive. I could hear the rickshaws coming, and I enjoyed welcoming parents in, welcoming people in, and I felt that sort of first contact with the school was key, really. So that was part of how I sensed that role. At the same time, Janine, along with you, I think I was involved in the playgroup.
Yes.
And the playgroup, the staff children, and a few other children who were local children who were coming in. And I really appreciated that. I also taught art. So I did other things, but my main sense was family.
And I'm glad you mentioned parents, because I know for me, because my first contact with Hebron was obviously as a parent, and I think for me it was that sense of welcoming that parents had, and I think for many parents it was a place that we enjoyed not just coming to see our children, obviously, but there was a sense in which we were welcomed and were seen as being part of the whole community, which I think was very important, but also very unusual. And I think that's one of the greatest things, I think, is to encourage parents to feel at home. And I think particularly for those parents who are working in Christian ministry, being able to come and meet with others involved in similar things, was a great...
I remember, Janine, a lovely conversation we had, you and I, at the playground.
Right.
And it was the first visit that you made after Catherine had come. And I remember we both had tears running down our cheeks because, it's very emotional. And I think this is what makes Hebron also very special, that a lot of parents are having to make a hard decision. And particularly at that time when young children were coming into school. And we sort of had empathy with one another. Yes.
I certainly had an incredible gratefulness that Ruthie had taken up this role, which was not an official role in any sense at all. But I would often say to her, love, I'm having a problem with that lady staff member. Do you could just see her and just see what's going on? And I tell you, I was tremendously grateful for the way that Ruthie spent sometimes hours, with some different, who quite, for very good reasons, were very upset with things, were very upset with things that were happening, sometimes so far away from support of their home and their own families, etc. Single women, for example, who are really struggling in their own life, let alone the situation that they found
I
themselves
remember
in.
also actually going back to the building, one of the things when we first came, all the single staff just had a single room.
Yeah, that's right.
And we sensed that that's not really fair. Just because they're single, why should they just have a room? And so I think Hillside, the old cow sheds were converted into...
That's where we lived for
Hillside.
5 years.
Yes. But
Well,
at
also
that time,
Cypress Court too.
Yes.
That the top floor was
that's
single.
right, it was single.
Yeah.
So that was also, I think, we tried to make small flats for our single staff as well, which just helps people to feel they have a home and a place.
Yeah, they can invite
It's
people
about home, place, family, which is so key, I think, here in Hebron.
So let's move on. We've moved into the area of student welfare from dorm sizes, but there are a number of other things I think that would really help students in their experience of being at Hebron, which were very different from my experience. One of the most significant, I think, was the change of the school calendar. And I'm not sure if it happened in your time as a result of you or it had happened earlier, but the move from having 3 terms
Yes.
to having 2 semesters with a mid-semester break of a full 9-day break.
Yeah.
April, of course, is the Parents' Week, and Drama Week in October, both very cunningly designed, I think, to entice parents to the
Yes,
school.
yes.
And do we attribute that to you? That change of the
I think
calendar?
actually that the split into 4 sections was actually done by Jonathan Ingleby before we arrived. But I think Parents' Week was something which we strongly developed, which was to get all the family together for a week in the middle of the year, when they would come up and enjoy this kind of atmosphere, because we knew they were working in very hard circumstances. And I remember that as a boy, that my parents would come up and spend the whole of May up here. I had to go to school, but still the fact that I could be a day scholar for 1 month of the year was a fantastic relief for me. So making it a holiday also was an important part, I think, of enabling families to feel that they're part of the school.
Yes, because the reality is, in my case in the 60s, because my parents worked in Nepal, I only went home for the Christmas holidays.
Yes.
And they would come down for their annual leave, use all their annual leave, travelling by train for 6 days from Nepal to here. We had 3 weeks holiday and then they would go back, and I wouldn't see them from May until December when I went home. So the duration of separation of families was really extensive, particularly for families who lived a long way away. And the new structure that we currently have, and I hope it will always remain, because I think it's very unique to Hebron. Other schools don't have this. But it actually means that the time of separation is 8 or 9 weeks at a time at the most. And then you have either the mid-semester break, or you have the long summer monsoon break, or the Christmas break.
Yes.
And I think that has been so good in terms of enhancing family time, togetherness, which just wasn't the case in my time.
And also the sense that families are welcome and part of the whole process for the well-being of
not
the
only welcomed,
students.
encouraged,
Enticed,
I
enticed
would
is the
say,
word.
to come back.
Yes.
And that's right, because in my time, students could stay at school during the holidays, in fact had to. So my September holidays, I was always here at school. It was okay. But now, the school says, parents, it's your responsibility, be with your children. And I think that's such a good thing.
And of course, this was also true when children got into problems. Now, after we left Hebron, our kids were still here, and one of my kids got into quite serious problems. The school said that he would have to be out of the school for a week. And the only way that he could be out of the school for a week was that I had to come from Hong Kong, where we were present at that time. I had to come to the school, take my son out, and live in Uti with him for a week. And that was a fantastic opportunity for me to be with my son. He got himself into some problems, but I had a week with my son on my own enjoying his company. And it's great.
And
I
he
have to
looks
say,
back
I
on
wasn't the principal at the time.
but he looks back on that as one of the best times of his life.
Oh, it was
and
fabulous.
you know, the thing is, I'm sure your children, our children, most students have these blips, and
Yes.
how marvelous when
Our
parents
students
are involved.
had several. Our children had several blips. We won't go into that.
No,
As
but
it do.
so did ours.
Yes.
And that's the thing, and that's one of the challenges of being, the child of a principal and principal's wife,
Yes.
is that it's much more difficult for them.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with
Yeah.
all three of our children in different ways.
They'll
at
forgive
different
us.
times.
They'll forgive us. And you know, sometimes when we watch them, we're just in admiration of.
Well, they
of them
look back
bringing up their
actually
own
and they see
children.
those moments, as you
Yes,
say,
yes.
as being very significant in their own development.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
At the time, they were painful, but there's a biblical principle there. We look back and see that they were for our good and benefit. But let me just jump back to something else. When you came in 1972, Rod, you came as a short-term staff member.
Yeah.
But then we developed, the school developed this system of having international guests.
Okay.
And I think that's your term, isn't
Yes,
it, Ruthie?
yes,
so
it
just
is.
say a little
It
bit
is.
about that, and then we'll move on to something
Yes,
else.
one of the things that has been a wonderful legacy, I think, from that time is this team of international guests, and we decided that it would be great to have young people, although they weren't all young, but they were mostly young in our time when they came for one of the semesters. They could come for a year, but most of them just came for 6 months, and their experience of life for them as people was terrific, because they came into an atmosphere in Hebron where they had plenty of opportunity to develop their own skills. They were assistant teachers, they worked in PE, they did dramas and music, and we were so grateful for their skills in the school. Also, we saw that they worked as a wonderful bridge for re-entry for our students going back from Hebron into life in either UK or Australia or the States, and or wherever they were going, perhaps still maybe into India. But these young people were remarkable in what they offered to the school. But we found again and again that they would testify that what they learned from being at Hebron, they felt was more than they gave. But
And very often the best IGs were actually alumni.
Many of them.
Who were coming home.
They were
back.
coming home, and then they were able to experience Hebron from the other side.
Right.
And I remember,
But they also understood Hebron, from
the
that,
heart, from the heart
other
of
side.
Hebron.
Yeah.
But they used to find it quite strange being able to walk into the staff room. If they were alumni, you could always tell.
Yeah.
And also, they found it difficult to call any of the staff members by their Christian name.
I think it might be appropriate to mention how the birth of that started. The birth of that scheme started with a young fellow who left here, and after 6-8 months, he committed suicide because he could not fit into his environment where he went back home. And we knew,
not home, passport
well,
country.
his passport country, he couldn't fit in. He was a young fellow, only about 13, 14. And it was devastating for us to feel that this kid who we knew so much as our student had come to such a desperate point. And so with that in our hearts, we thought we must make it easier for these kids to be able to move back into their home cultures. We have to bring those guys out here so that they can get used to the music, the culture, and the way of working or living in their own home countries. So that was the motivation behind it, which developed into this.
I think that was definitely one of the things. That was a very key area. But I think it's this whole delight. The other piece of this, and John, you're really, both of you work so much with third culture, with MKs, and we sense that the value, the power, the blessing of being a third culture person, where your passport country and we wanted to, as well as the sense of family here at Hebron, we wanted to promote the understanding of the value of being a third culture person,
Yeah.
Rod and I are both third culture people. Our children are fourth culture, if there's such a thing, and our grandchildren are fifth. So, you know,
There's no
it's,
such thing.
such thing.
But that's okay. They're all third culture kids.
yes,
But we
yes,
won't go down that. No. Yeah. But the point you're making is this multicultural dimension
Yes.
to
Such a blessing.
life in Hebron,
Yeah.
and the IGs have brought a lot to
The
it.
IGs have
yeah,
really
yeah,
helped
yeah,
with that.
yeah.
We,
And the IG coordination and role has, for many years, been one of the things that the principal's wife has done
Yes.
Yes.
traditionally. You know,
Yes,
so
yes.
Janine did that
Yes.
in the two
Yes.
innings here.
And it was lots of fun, Janine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, you were talking, I remember having to have, you know, little chats about what people wore and what and what was appropriate within the culture, and various things. But it still is such an amazing blessing. In fact, we're looking forward to the fact that one of our grandsons is going to come as an IG soon.
Well, our son Nicholas was here in 2006 when Aidan started as a boarder.
Really?
Nicholas was here as an IG,
Well,
so that was
that's
a
lovely.
bonus.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned about reentry or the leaving of Hebron and moving on. And you mentioned, a tragic case.
Yes.
But one of the things that we worked hard to do when we were here, which added to that, was the introduction of the Leavers program to prepare Hebron students to leave Hebron. And that started in 1998. Angie Dodds was a big part of that. But we also saw a real need to prepare Hebron students for the big move from here. Some people talk about the Hebron bubble. Into the real world. I don't agree with that. Hebron is the real world.
Yes,
It's just a different
different real
scenario.
world. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the Leavers program has continued on. It's evolved and developed since the early years, and it's been fantastic. And I think it's been very helpful.
Yes.
Feature of Hebron, and in many ways a unique feature. I think Hebron was one of the first schools of this kind to introduce a Leavers program. And I think we still lead the way in that area. So it goes back a long way, but it has come a long way as well.
Excellent.
Because I think our time is gone.
Yes.
But is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
Well, I'd
before we
like to
finish?
just say how thrilled we are to see the school as it is now, functioning in such a way. And these grounds are so incredibly well looked after. It's a pleasure to come in and sense, that the place that we left so many years ago and all our kids came through is now flourishing so much so that it just gives me just a real sense of warmth and welcome back into this campus. It really is superb. Thank you.
Yes, and we watched the school drama. What a drama. That could be put on in the West End. It was the excellence. I think that's another factor that we've talked about family. We talked about being a safe place of where people are able to talk about deep issues and all of that, but also a place of excellence.
And actually the drama festival was a way of getting those families up.
Exactly.
Well,
Well,
that's
that's what I
right.
was saying. That's
Yeah.
part of the
Yes.
enticement.
Enticement.
Of enticing
Yes.
family and parents
Yes.
back to the school.
That's right.
And we've seen so many
It's
parents
unique.
this
It's
week.
unique
Yes.
in Hebron. I mean, the other
Yeah.
similar schools to this one, I won't name them, don't have those features,
Yeah.
and there's very little interaction between parents
Yes.
and the school at the school.
Yes.
Yeah.
They drop their kids off and that's it.
Yeah.
So
And I
Hebron
think-
is very
yeah.
unique in that regard.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised about the quality of the drama the other night. Everyone's saying how wonderful it was.
Yes.
But I say, well, of course. Why should we be surprised? There's such a long legacy of the drama tradition in Hebron
Yeah.
that there's no surprise in what we saw the other night.
Perhaps one final thing I'd love to add is the centrality of prayer in Hebron, and that you can sense it. The prayer breakfast, which
Did you start those?
We did.
Yes, I thought
think
so, because they always used to be in
our house,
in your
in our
lounge
sitting
room there,
Yes,
which is
I think the Wallaces had something similar earlier on before us, quite in the. I think they had, but we felt we want to have a gathering, and at that time our sitting room used to be packed. There was standing room only, and cheese toast would be passed over heads.
I was just going to say, well, the cheese toast tradition continues.
Cheese toast was very popular.
Cheese toast and cheese toast and sweet tea, chai, and that was wonderful. But the prayer, both in that at that time, but also amongst staff as you walk around, say, well, let's pray. And at the staff meeting, before I think, Rod, you changed the day of the staff meeting from a Monday to a Thursday night, which was a more relaxed.
But also we had prayer first.
And
then
that continues.
Yes.
That tradition continues.
Yeah. And so the rock solid sense of prayer being the powerhouse of Hebron. When we came to the prayer breakfast in this chapel this week, it was so encouraging.
And Ruthie mentioned at that time, the time when a student was dying in a hospital in Coimbatore, and the whole school...
He was a student from the year 2000
that's
batch.
right.
Yes.
The whole school got together in the assembly and just in groups to just...
Yeah, that was a very significant time.
It was. And when...
And Reagan, Joseph.
That's right.
And I'm in touch with Reagan.
Yeah.
And I'm planning to do an interview with him.
Wonderful.
When I get back to
good,
Australia. He lives in
good.
Perth now as a pastor.
Was
So
he?
we'll let him tell the story.
Boy,
I want him to tell the story.
Yeah.
It needs to be recorded.
very
Yes,
powerful
yes.
time.
And for a family, for ourselves as people, and also for our whole family, we're hugely grateful to Hebron.
Yeah.
There's no place
Well, I
quite
think we
like
all
it.
are.
Yeah.
We all are. And on that note, we'll finish. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
We
you
could go on
very
for
much.
hours.
We
Thank you
could.
so much. It's been great.
Lovely. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.